Hi, I'm Anita. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be making the Enlaced tile bracelet. This is an original design by Renee Kovnesky from her book entitled Exquisite Stitching. I'm going to be using tile beads today, 3mm bicone crystals, superduos, O beads, 11O seed beads, 15O seed beads, and I'm going to use a magnetic clasp and a few findings. I'm going to use 2 4mm closed jump rings and 2 6mm open jump rings. For tools, you're going to also need 2 pairs of flat nose pliers, a pair of scissors, a size 10 beading needle, and you're also going to need a size 12 beading needle because this will have parts where you're going to be going through the beads multiple times, and then you'll need a smaller needle to get through those. I'll have all of the amounts and quantities for this project listed in the description box. If you click more at the beginning of this video, you'll see all the details with links to the suppliers and also a link to my website. By the way, I am running a half-off sale that ends at the end of September of this year, 2024. Feel free to go shopping and see if you can find a deal for yourself. There'll be a couple of these posted online as well. So with that said, let's get started. To start, we're going to string our needle, your size 10 beading needle, with 2 wingspans of 6-pound fireline, and then we're going to get started with our pattern. So first of all, we're going to be using tile beads. This is a multi-hole bead, two holes in this bead. And you want to make sure none of these holes are blocked. So check all your multi-hole beads when you're doing that project. I'm going to give you a quick glimpse of what we're making today. This is a version of what we're making. This was done in royal blue with some white O-bead accents and galvanized gold on the seed beads. And this was made with a ball socket clasp. Today's we're going to be making it with a magnetic clasp. And really you can make this with any type of clasp you want. If you want it more adjustable, I would suggest doing a lobster clasp with an extender chain. This bracelet will probably measure about 7 inches when we're done. So let's get started. All right, we're going to begin by going through our tile bead on the left hole, coming from the top side like this. Bring your thread down, and you're going to leave about a 6 to 8 inch tail, and we'll be weaving that in later. So now we're going to pick up 3 11/0s like that, and we're going in through the right hole of the tile bead. Pull your thread through. Now we're going to go back through the left hole and we're going to go back through the 3 11/0s. And then we're going to go back up the right side of the tile bead like this. Now we're going to do a surgeon's knot. So set your needle down, grab your thread with the tail end, and we're going to cross over the working thread and go through this loop twice. There's once, there's twice, and pull. Now we're going to take your tail thread and we're going to go over the working thread this direction, go through the loop twice. There's once and twice, and pull. So that's what you should have. This is your tail thread, and this is your working thread. Just try to get that as tight as you can. So after you've tied your surgeon's knot, you're going to go back through the left hole of your tile bead and through all 3 11-ohs, and then back up the right side of your tile bead. That will set us up to go on to the next step. And just try to keep your work snug, and we'll be weaving in that tail later on. So back up the right side. And that's what you should have. So now we're ready to go on to the next step. For our next step, we're going to pick up an 11-oh, an O bead, an 11-oh, another O bead, and an 11-oh. So that's what you should have. 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh. Now we're also going to pick up another tile bead on the right hand side, like that. Do that again. So now we're going to repeat that. We're going to pick up 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh, and then a tile bead going through the right hand side. 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh. Tile bead on the right hand side. Bring that down. And that's what you have. So it's going to flop around a little bit until we get all the way to the end. So you're going to repeat that pattern until you get the length of bracelet that you want. So keep in mind, this is going to be a 7-inch bracelet. So if you want a 7-inch, you're going to want to go about 6 inches on this. If you want it longer, if you wanted an 8-inch, you'd want to go 7 inches on this. So I've got 14 tile beads for this project, and that's going to get me a 7-inch bracelet. If you want it bigger, you'll have to add more tile beads and a few more O beads, etc. So continue adding. I'll do one more with you. We're picking up an 11-oh, an O bead, 11-oh, an O bead, an 11-oh, and a tile bead, right hand hole like that. Bring that down to your work. And continue repeating that until you reach the length of your bracelet. And then I'll meet you back for the next step. Okay, we're coming down to our last tile bead. Picking up my 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh, O bead, 11-oh, and tile bead. So that's what I have so far. And my length is measuring about 6 inches. So now that we have all of our length here, you want to draw these up snug but not too tight. Now we're picking up 3 11-ohs, and we're going in through the empty hole of our tile bead right here. Pull your thread. So now we're going to repeat on this side what we did here. So we're going to start with an 11-0, an O bead, 11-0, O bead, and an 11-0. So now take your needle, go through the empty hole of the tile bead, the next tile bead. Then pull your thread. And again, 11-0, O bead, 11-0, O bead, and 11-0 in through the empty hole of the next tile bead. Like that. And you're going to continue adding that sequence until we get to the end. So go ahead and continue, and I'll meet you when I get to the end. Okay, we're coming down to our last tile bead, picking up an 11-0, O bead, 11-0, O bead, and 11-0. So we're going through the empty hole and through these three seed beads, and then back up the right hole. Now we're going up the right hole. So that's where we should be, right here. So for our next step, we're going to sew through an 11-0, an O bead, and an 11-0. So we go through this 11-0, the O bead, and the 11-0. So your needle should be coming out of that center 11-0. Like that. So with your thread coming out of the center 11-0, you're going to pick up 3 11-0s, and you're going to go back through the 11-0 that your thread is coming out of, and then we're going to go through the O bead. So you're bringing your thread back through the 11-0, and you're going to exit the O bead like that. That's going to place a picot on that center 11-0. So that's what you should have. For our next step, we're going to pick up a crystal, then we're going to pick up 2 O beads and a crystal, like that. So from here, we're exiting this O bead. We're going to skip this 11-0, and we're going to sew through the O bead and the 11-0 right there. And that's going to place the crystal, the 2 O beads in the crystal, like that against that tile bead. So now we're going to pick up 3 more 11-0s. We're exiting this 11-0. You're going to go back through the other side of the 11-0 and then through the O bead, like that. And that places the picot on that center 11-0. Now we're going to pick up a crystal, 2 O beads, and a crystal. We're exiting that O bead. We're going to go in through the next O bead and the 11-0, like that. And we're going to repeat this pattern all the way up. I'll do one more with you. So when you're at the center 11-0, you're going to pick up 3 more 11-0s. You're going back through that 11-0 and the O bead. Now you're going to pick up a crystal, 2 O beads, and a crystal. You're exiting this O bead, going in through. You're skipping this 11-0 tile bead and 11-0. You're going through the next O bead and 11-0. So that's what you should have. So you're going to repeat that pattern all the way up, and then I'll meet you when we get to the end. So you're picking up 3 11-0s for your picot here, going through the 11-0 and the O bead. Then you're picking up a crystal, 2 O beads, a crystal, and you're skipping this 11-0, going in through the O bead and the 11-0, and you're repeating that all the way through. So I'll meet you when we get to the end. Okay, so we're coming out of this O bead here. Just completed my 3 11-0s for my picot here. Picked up a crystal, 2 O beads, and a crystal. Exiting this O bead, skipping the 11-0, the tile, and the 11-0, and going through this 11-0 and this O bead and this 11-0. Now I'm going to pick up 3 11-0s, exiting here, going back through the 11-0, the O bead, the 11-0, and the tile bead. To complete this side. So now we're going to turn our thread around, exiting this tile bead. You're going to go through these next 3 11-0s at the end. Now bring your thread back up through this tile bead, then through the 11-0, the O bead, and the 11-0, like that. As you can guess, we're going to repeat what we did all across here on this side. So I'll get you started, then I'll send you on your way. So your thread should be coming out of this center 11-0. You're going to pick up 3 11-0s, go back through the 11-0 and the O bead, like that. From here, you're picking up a crystal, 2 O beads, and a crystal. You're exiting the O bead. You're going to skip the 11-0, the tile bead, and the 11-0, going in through the next O bead and the 11-0. So you're going to repeat those 2 steps until you get to the end. Go all the way across, and then I'll meet you back when we get near the end. Okay, we're coming down to the end here. So I'm picking up my 3 11-0s, exiting this 11-0, going through the 11-0 and the O bead. Now I'm picking up a crystal, an O bead, an O bead, and a crystal. Exiting this O bead, going in through the next O bead and the 11-0. Now I'm picking up 3 11-0s, going back through this 11-0 and the O bead and the 11-0 and the tile bead and the 11-0, like that. So now we're going to go through these next 2 11-0s. Now we're going to go back up through the tile bead in this direction. So before we do that, because we've gone through this multiple times, we're going to be switching to a size 12 beading needle. So go ahead and change your needle out from your 10 to your 12, and I'll meet you back. Okay, now that we have our size 12 beading needle on, we've completed both sides embellishment with our crystals and O beads, and we want to be coming out of these 3 11-0s here. And now we're going to advance our needle through this tile bead here, right side. And we're also going through the 11-0 bead, like that. Just pull your thread. Now we're going to advance our needle through these next 2 O beads. So you're going through this O bead and this O bead, like that. You're skipping the 11-0. Now we're going to advance our needle through the crystal and the first O bead, like that. Now we're going to pick up a superduo. It doesn't matter which hole you go into. And the thing I want to warn you about is always check your superduos to make sure you have both holes drilled. So picking up a superduo, exiting this O bead, going into the next O bead and crystal, and next 2 O beads, like that. So you're exiting this first O bead, pick up your superduo, going through the next O bead, crystal, and the next 2 O beads. And that's going to place that superduo in between those 2 O beads, like that. So now we're going to advance our needle through the crystal and the next O bead. Pick up another superduo. Okay, now that you've picked up your superduo, exiting this O bead, you're going into the next O bead, crystal, and the next 2 O beads. like that. It's going to place that super duo in between those two O beads. So we're going to be repeating this pattern. I'll do a couple more with you. So we're exiting this set of two O beads here. We're going to advance our needle through the crystal and the next O bead. So where you ever have the two crystals and the two O beads, that's where the super duo is going to be picked up in between those two. So we're picking up super duo, going in through the next O bead, the crystal, and the next two O beads. Like that. Just pull your work snug. So now we need to advance our needle to get to the next set of crystals. So we're exiting this O bead here, go through this crystal and the first O bead. Like that. Pick up another super duo, go through the next O bead, crystal, and two O beads. So continue that way until we get to the end. And I'll meet you back. Okay, I'm coming down to my last section to add my super duo here. I'm exiting these two O beads, going in through the crystal and the first O bead, picking up super duo, going in through the next O bead, crystal, and these two O beads at the end. So that completes this side of embellishing with our super duos. Okay, from here, we're going to advance our needle through the 11-0, the tile bead, turn my work around. We're going through the 3 11-0s at the end. And now I'm going back up through the tile bead, and I'm going to advance my needle until I get to this middle of these two O beads where the first set of two crystals are. So I'm going to advance my needle through the tile bead, the 11-0, and the next two O beads. If you can't get it through both O beads at the same time, you can do it one at a time because you have to kind of do it at an angle. So I'm going to go through the next O bead. I'm skipping the 11-0s, just going through the two O beads here. So I can step up for my next row. So coming out of this O bead, I'm advancing through the first crystal and the first O bead, like that. And we're going to continue with the pattern of adding our super duos. So I'm picking up a super duo, going in through the next O bead and crystal, and the next two O beads, like that. And that's going to place that super duo in between those two O beads, like that. Now we're going to advance our needle through the next crystal and the first O bead. Pick up another super duo, go through the next O bead, crystal, and two O beads. Advance your needle through the crystal and the first O bead. And you're going to repeat that pattern, adding a super duo and advancing your needle and so forth. So continue with that pattern and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, we're coming down to the last super duo. So I'm advancing my needle through this crystal and O bead. Picking up my super duo, going in through the next O bead, crystal, and the next two O beads. So that's what we should have so far. So from here, we're going to advance our needle through the next 11O, tile bead, and 11O. Now I'm going to advance my needle through the next 11O. I'm going to be adding the first half to prep for my clasp. So I'm going to pick up 6 15-ohs, and one of my 4mm closed jump rings. So from here, I'm going back through the other side of that 11O I'm exiting from. And that's going to place a closed jump ring at the end, and I will be adding the magnetic clasp and 6mm jump ring to this when we're all done. So from here, I'm going to reinforce this 2 more times. So go back through all of the beads twice. And we're reinforcing this 3 times because it's a stressful part of the bracelet where your clasp is going to be, so it's going to have a lot of tension on it, and this will just keep it extra secure. Going to advance my needle, reinforcing this 1 more time. And that should be good enough. So our thread is coming out of this center 11O. So now we're going to advance our needle down through the next 11O and the tile bead and the 11O. Let's get this tail thread out of the way. So that's where we should be coming out of this 11O here. Now what we want to do is advance our needle so that it's coming out of this second bead of the picot. So bring your needle through the O bead, the first O bead, and then advance your needle through these two 11 O's right here. So that's where you should be, right there. For our next step of embellishment, we're going to be picking up 15 O's. Let's get these 11 O's out of the way. So we're going to start with 4 15 O's. Like that. You're exiting this picot here. Bring your needle through the superduo empty hole. Now pick up 4 more 15 O's. And you want to go through the next picot. And as you're doing this, if these tend to flip down or you can't see them, just squish them with your finger and get them lined up to where you need to be. So from here, we're coming out of the superduo. We want to go into the next picot where the tip of the bead is sticking out right there. Okay, so we're going to repeat that step. Get my next picot here, because they're tending to bend down to where you can't see them, so you just need to rearrange them with your fingertips. So now we're going to pick up 4 15 O's. Exiting this picot here, we're going in through the next superduo empty hole. Pick up 4 more 15 O's, exiting the superduo, going into the next picot. Right there. And again, pick up 4 more 15 O's, exiting the picot, going into the next superduo. Pick up 4 more 15 O's, exiting the superduo, going into the next picot, which is down here. Just have to fish him back up. And there he is. Go through that tip of the picot. Like that. So you're going to be repeating that pattern all the way up your bracelet. Pick up 4 15 O's, exiting the picot, going in the superduo. Pick up 4 15 O's, exiting the superduo, going into the picot, and so forth. So continue with that pattern, and I'll meet you when we get to the end. Okay, we're coming down to the end here, picking up 4 15 O's, exiting the picot, going in through the next superduo, picking up 4 more 15 O's, going in through the last picot. So from here, I'm going to advance my needle to get to this center 11O at the end of my tile bead so I can prep for my next closed O-ring for my clasp. So from here, I'm going to advance my needle through this next 11O and the O bead. Now I'm going to advance my needle through the 11O and the tile bead. and the 11-0. Now I'm going to advance my needle through the center 11-0 right here. Now I'm going to pick up 6 15-0s, and my other 4mm closed jump ring. Exiting this 11-0, going in through the opposite side, reinforcing this 2 more times. So go ahead and reinforce these 2 more times, and I'll meet you back. Okay, I've just reinforced this for the 3rd time. My needle's coming through that center 11-0, like that. Now I'm going to advance my needle down through the next 11-0, my tile bead, and the 11-0, like that. So with your thread coming out of that 11-0 after the tile bead, you're going to advance your needle through the next O bead. Now you're going to advance your needle through the next 2 11-0s on that picot, like that. So now we're ready to continue the pattern on this side as we did over here. So coming out of the picot, you're picking up 4 15-0s, going in through the empty hole of the superduo. Pick up 4 15-0s, exiting the superduo, going into the picot. And you're going to repeat that all the way to the end, and I'll meet you when we get down to the last one. Okay, we're coming down to the end here. Picking up 4 15-0s, exiting this superduo, going in through my picot, picking up 4 more 15-0s, exiting the picot, going in through the last superduo, picking up my last 4 15-0s, exiting the superduo, going into my last picot. So that completes the pattern. So what we're going to do now is we're going to weave our thread through a few of our beads. So I'm just going to advance my needle through the next 11-0 in that picot. Then down through the 11-0 and the O bead and the 11-0 by that tile bead. Pull that snug, and I'm going to start doing some half hitch knots. So I'm going to do a half hitch knot here, bringing my thread under a thread bridge, and when you have a small loop, pass your needle back through that loop and pull. and that'll place that knot close to your work. I'm advancing my needle back through the tile bead on the other side. Bring my needle through that loop, pull snug. Now I'm going to advance my needle through a few more beads. I'm going to do one more half hitch knot here. Advance my needle through this 11-0 and tile bead and a few more beads, and I'm going to cut my thread here. So from there we have this tail thread. So what I want you to do is take your needle, weave it through, tie a couple of knots, and I'll meet you back to do the clasp. Okay, we've got all our tail threads woven in and clipped off, and now for our final step to add the clasp, and we're almost done. So take your 6mm jump ring. This is the open jump ring, and I'm using 2 pairs of flat nose pliers. So holding that with your right hand, take your other flat nose and just bend that towards you. So you have an opening like that. So I'm going to pop that through my jump ring on my bracelet, take one end of my magnetic clasp, pop that on, and now I'm going to close that nice and snug. So there it is. Very easy to do. This is why I prefer to use a small closed jump ring for the end. That way it doesn't add too much more length to my bracelet. You can use a larger jump ring here if you wanted to, and that'll give you another maybe 1/4 inch of length on your bracelet. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Take my jump ring, open that, pop that on my closed jump ring, put my other clasp end, and close my jump ring. And the nice thing about magnetic clasps, you don't have to worry about it coming apart. This is a pretty strong magnet, so it takes some pretty heavy pulling to pull that apart. So I would suggest this is a pretty hefty bracelet, so I would suggest a pretty heavy magnet for this, just to be safe. So you can use lobster clasp if you don't want to do magnet. That'll give you a little bit more length. So my finished length for this ended up being, with the magnetic clasp, about 7.5 inches. So it's a little bit bigger than I wanted, but that's okay. It'll fit just fine. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I hope that you subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Hit that like button and share it with your family and friends. Also, the list of materials for today's project is in the description box. If you click more below this video, that'll open up the box and it'll give you all the details of all the types of beads I used and weights and measurements. Also, it'll give you the link to the book that this design is based on. It's from an artist named Renee Kovnesky, and the book is called Exquisite Stitching. So that's available to you. Also, please check out my website. I do sell jewelry that I make. You'll see a couple of these listed on the website for sale. I'm also running a 50% off sale on purchases over $25. So the sale runs through the end of September 2024. So if you're interested, curious to see my other pieces, I have lots of jewelry and it's a great deal. So again, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful week and happy beading.